A week ago, we were in Georgia, and we had Mike Griffith on the show. And I went in to get something, and I was leaving, and I looked over as I was getting in the car, and there's Griff surrounded by a bunch of. I thought Taylor Swift had dropped by. Griff, what's going on with all the selfies and the autographs? I mean, you're definitely a star in Athens.
I told him I knew you. That made me famous. I said, yeah, I know Feinbaum. I can tell you some really good stories about Paul back in the day in Birmingham, Alabama, when he was terrorizing the Alabama and Auburn fans and doing talk radio. And now you've gone conference wide and they can't get enough of you. So here we are, Paul.
Yeah, so you've taken that spot as the Griff man. So Mike, let's stick to Georgia for a second, because
Sure.
It feels like everything is settled down, and as you very accurately predicted with us a week ago, they would dominate, and it seems like nobody's questioning their prowess as the number one team in the country anymore.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, exactly how much security Georgia should have. I mean, it was Kentucky after all. And, Mark Stoops made a really good point that, Georgia's got better players. Georgia has elite players, and Kentucky simply can't match that talent. And who can? I mean, you pointed out very well that, South Carolina and Auburn gave this Georgia team trouble. And other than beating Kentucky, what has Georgia done? They'll beat Vanderbilt this week, then they'll have a bye week, and then they'll beat Florida, which, by the way, this is pretty interesting and historic. When Georgia beats Florida in Jacksonville this year, that will be the second longest streak of consecutive wins against SEC teams. Only Alabama will be ahead, and if Georgia wins out this year, they'll have the longest winning streak in SEC games in league history. So we're starting to see a lot of records fall by the wayside. Georgia's in some pretty hallowed grounds now. It's interesting to see how Georgia's doing it, because it's not like they're as dominant as maybe some of the championship teams. I mean, they came from 10 down against South Carolina. They came from 10 down against the Auburn Tigers. Last year, Missouri had Georgia on the ropes. A lot of this is coaching and scheming and X's and O's. So in some ways, very impressive that Kirby Smart's getting this done. And yet when we look at Georgia, you say, on a given Saturday, there's probably 4 or 5 teams, I think, that people think could beat Georgia right now.
Talking to Mike, and Mike, let's get to some other SEC matters. Tennessee this week, maybe the most interesting game. You've got Tennessee, a lot of mysteries there. Then you have A&M limping in to Big Orange Country. Not a good place to go try to find yourself, is it?
No, Josh Heupel's done a great job at Neyland Stadium. I think he's 15-3 there. It's going to be hard for A&M to go in there and get a win, and yet this is not a Tennessee. When we think about Josh Heupel in Tennessee, we think about the prolific pass attack that they had the first 2 years. You look at the SEC, though, I believe Tennessee's only 13th in passing, and they've lost Brew McCoy, a very special receiver to them. And you wonder, does Tennessee have enough weapons to beat A&M on the perimeter? Does A&M have a good enough defensive front? As celebrated or as high paid it is, whichever route you want to go there, are they going to be able to stop what's been a really strong Tennessee run game? I think this comes down, this is going to sound crazy, I think this comes down to the crowd. I watched in the Swamp when Florida beat Tennessee, and I'm going to tell you that Tennessee would have beaten Florida anywhere but the Swamp that night. But that crowd went nuts. They made it difficult. They created havoc. And Neyland Stadium needs to do that. I saw where Gary Danielson recently said that Neyland Stadium was like other stadiums, and I would digress. I would definitely disagree with that. Having been around the league, when Neyland is pumped up, it is probably one of the top 2 or 3 venues in the nation. I don't think it's just another stadium. So I was surprised to hear Gary Danielson say that.
I've got to push back, Mike. Gary Danielson's already got his mind on the Big Ten. He's just mailing it in the rest of the way. So he doesn't want to give the SEC too much credit.
Maybe so. There may be a motive behind that, and to me, that is the game of the week, certainly. And I want to see what Sam Pittman and Arkansas do against Alabama. I don't think Nick Saban's ever lost to Arkansas at Alabama. And poor Pittman and these Hogs, the scheduling just keeps coming at them. And at some point, you just feel like Arkansas has got to get a break. And Alabama won at A&M, but I want to kind of keep an eye on it. It's a big spread. It's 19 points. But Sam Pittman and the Hogs, this may be their last chance to be relevant this year. I want to kind of keep an eye on that game. And South Carolina and Florida. Now, this is great. So I talked with Coach Spurrier earlier this week. He's going to be at this game. And I didn't realize this. We were talking, and I asked him about being at Carolina and how do you win at a place like that. And he said he was pretty good against Georgia and 10. I said, well, I looked it up, Paul. Steve Spurrier over a 4-year period was 13-3 against Tennessee, Georgia, Florida, and Clemson. Are you kidding me? I'm going to repeat that. South Carolina went 13-3 against Florida, Tennessee, Georgia, and Clemson when Steve Spurrier was there. That was between 2010 and 13. What a remarkable run. Now, I don't know if or how that ever transferred. I know his name is on some buildings at South Carolina. His name is on the field at Florida. I think he's the best coach either program's ever had. It's going to be a really interesting showdown. Carolina won there a couple years ago in Columbia. Florida dominated them last year. I think both of these teams really need this win. Maybe this could be like a bowl eligible kind of game because I think both of these teams really risk getting on a slippery slope if they lose in Columbia Saturday night. That's going to be a tough one. I did hear on the SEC teleconference, the reporters were asking Billy Napier about some sleep studies that are being done now and there. And Billy was, you're laughing, but Billy was talking about the importance of getting enough rest. And I don't want to say that was groundbreaking, but it was very interesting to me that this is where a lot of the resources and energies are going is to, so hopefully for the Florida fans, it'll be a very rested Florida team when they go in, and maybe the Gamecocks, meanwhile, are going to try to deliver a wake-up call.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, this game, the loser is just in terrible shape. I mean, I know that wouldn't get me A+ from my journalism 101 teacher, but it's true. Another game like that is really Kentucky and Missouri, and you say, well, they were both undefeated a week ago, but the loser walks out of this stadium having seen it all go down the drain.
Yeah, I don't know what to say about Missouri. I mean, Joker's wild. What are we going to get, like I said, with Eli Drinkwitz? Is he a nerd? Is he a cool guy? Is he a genius? Is he on? I from week to week, I just never know what I'm going to get from Missouri. But I will say this. It's been a great addition. I've called myself out on it. I didn't think they belonged, but they have been fun because you just never know what you're going to get with Missouri. You just never know. They're capable of pulling an upset, or they put a pretty good scare into Georgia last year, and they're capable of looking pretty bad too. Kentucky, meanwhile, I think the bottom line with Kentucky is I think Mark Stoops has taken this program as far as he can take it until people decide to start putting more money into the football bucket than the basketball bucket at Kentucky. And to me, it really wasn't about Georgia. I mean, Kirby and Mark get along great. Kirby didn't take any offense to anything he said. Mark is just calling it straight out. Look, Kentucky, if you want to compete in the SEC, you're going to have to buy better players. It's as simple as that. Your basketball team's paying all this money, and I don't know that they've been past the Sweet 16 in, 4 or 5 years, maybe something like that, maybe once. It hasn't been good. So I'm going to be real curious to see what Kentucky does. Do they pony up and decide to go all in and give Mark Stoops an opportunity to have equal talent and compete? Or does Mark Stoops at some point, now he is the 9th highest paid coach in the league, but does he maybe start thinking to himself that he's tired of being Charlie Brown? He's tired of getting pushed around and beat down by Georgia every single year. This was going to be the year. This was, and then, Kirby, just like Lucy, pulls the football and Kentucky falls flat on their back. And this was supposed to be the year, and they get beat 51 to. At some point, Mark Stoops realizes there's only so many years in his life, and money only has so much value. At some point, he's going to want to go somewhere where he can win championships. Because I think this guy is a pretty good coach. And I don't know where that is, but I'll bet you somebody would hire this guy, and I'll bet you that if he had equal talent, he could be competing with championships instead of being the longest tenured coach at a Power 5 school to have never won a division.
A few more, Griff, before you go, I have to go back to the sleep doctor, Billy Napier, for a second, because he feels like this is another one of those moments for him. And, it's always easier to wait, but a win and he gets a little momentum going into what you say is a sure defeat to Georgia. But the other side of that's pretty grim, isn't it?
Well, Paul, he's a really good guy. Billy Napier is a really good person, and he does things the right way. And the people at Florida really appreciate what a good guy he is. So I really hesitate to be critical of him because he's a good person. And, you sat down with Scott Strickland in Nashville, and he assured you that Billy was in really good shape. And so I know there's going to be a new offensive coordinator named. I know Steve Spurrier is going to be at the game Saturday night. I don't think those two things are necessarily related. But to your point, if Billy Napier loses this game or if Florida loses this game, you look at the rest of their schedule, and it's really hard to find surefire wins left on the Gators schedule. Now, who knows? Maybe Florida is onto something with this sleep schedule. You know, they're checking in and making sure their guys are getting enough sleep throughout the week. Maybe they've stumbled upon something down there in Gainesville simply by monitoring the team's sleep a little bit more closely. They may be a more energetic group on Saturday nights.
I want to semi-apologize to you for something I had nothing to do with, but a week ago when we were together, you suggested Spurrier to be the offensive coordinator, and all I did was say, that's a good idea, and as I'm later in the night, I'm looking at my phone, and it says, Feinbaum says Spurrier should be, that was not me, that was you.
Well, I suggested it, but you validate it, and certainly, you know, you carry a lot of weight with your strong opinions. I know that at one point, Deion Sanders was a guy that you thought would be a good coach. And let me tell you, you're not the only one that has said that. I've had someone else tell me that they feel like if Florida were to make a change, which I don't have any reason to believe that they will, based on what Scott Strickland said when you sat down with him in Nashville.
He's a good guy.
He's a great person, and they like good people in the SEC. Wouldn't that be something though if Deion Sanders were? Because my thought is this, and I, you know, Billy Napier, he could probably win it a lot of places, but my thought is this: I think Florida requires a little bit different cut. I just feel like there's a little bit different culture there that requires a little bit of swag is the only word I can come up with, and extra energy that Coach Spurrier brought. Remember, before Coach Spurrier went there, I'm not sure Florida had ever won an SEC title.
No, never.
Yeah. So
technically they won one, but it was taken away under Charlie Pell.
Correct, and I think Spurrier paid for the price for that. Otherwise, he'd be recognized with 7 conference titles in 12 years instead of 6. But even Urban Meyer brought a little something extra, you know, and you make what you want of that. You know, people have seen the Swamp Things documentary and, you know, whatever other video footage of her. But he brought a little something extra with the great Tim Tebow. And I just don't know that Billy brings that pop. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm selling him short. He could have a whole different personality that I'm not aware of. But it just doesn't seem like he fits. But it's way too early, Paul. Let's see how the season plays out. Let's give Billy Napier every opportunity. Florida people, they say they're all in behind him. There could be another season or 2 or 3. You know, there's a $32 million buyout. That's a lot of money for anybody. You don't know where, you know, Florida's finances are at. Maybe they simply can't afford to make the change. It's expensive to change coaches. And so I'm going to give Billy the benefit of the doubt for now. I want to watch Saturday night. I want to see if Florida looks alert and awake and well rested against Spencer Rattler, because I'm sure that Carolina is going to want to get even for what happened in Gainesville. That's going to be those are 2 great games you mentioned, A&M and Tennessee. I have no idea what's going to happen. And Carolina and Florida, another really. And then, of course, I know you'll be tuned in to watch Georgia and Vanderbilt in the noon game. I'm sure a lot of people will be watching that game.
Correction, I think Galen Hall may have taken over for Charlie Pell. He may have been the coach of record when they vacated those titles. Not the Florida fans are really going to quibble with us about something that happened 40 years ago.
Yeah, but it's going to be interesting, though. Georgia is streaking, trying to find their way in the record books. Brock Bowers, is the Heisman campaign real? Can a tight end win a Heisman Trophy in today's day and age? Tebow was pleading for people to watch him block and make plays away from. You know, you got to appreciate Tebow. He's always trying to do that. Maybe he should be a head coach. I think he's busy saving the world other places or something. But Tebow made a really good case. You know,
hold on before you go. I think you've just come up with the answer. Let Tebow be the offensive coordinator and just see how comfortable he is. But I mean, if nothing against Deion Sanders, but Tebow has a lot of the same skill sets that Deion Sanders has, and I think you put him offensive coordinator the rest of the way, see what he's capable of, and
now you're getting way off track here. Tebow is a team guy. Tebow would never go against what the Florida. Listen, Tim Tebow's not into that thing. Okay, you and I.
I'm not saying, but Griff, I'm not saying that he would. But if I know one thing about Tim Tebow, if Florida called, he would answer the call.
You make it sound like anybody could go in there and do a better job than Billy Napier.
Well, no, I'm just leaning on you. You're the Napierologist on the Feinbaum show.
I'm talking about Steve Spurrier. I'm talking about one of the greatest offensive
Well,
minds
no,
in football
Steve's going to be a fan. I think Tebow is capable. I mean, I think Tim would be a fantastic coach.
If you could put Tebow in uniform, he would do a lot more. But the guy, you see him, he could still run over anybody.
He can motivate. He can imagine Tim Tebow coming to your high school to recruit.
He's like a real life version of one of the Avengers or something.
Yeah.
Though. You see this guy walking down the sidewalk.
We will. By the way, every week we'll do this, and eventually we'll figure this problem out for the Gators. Griff, we'll see you next week. Thanks so much.
I appreciate it, Paul.
Mike Griffith joining us right here